Hello, welcome to our Sunday School lesson day. We're in the book of Daniel, following the Randall House uh, Bible Scholar textbook. Uh, our lesson today comes from Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 2 is skipped over, but I want to take a few moments just to say a couple of words about Daniel chapter 2. Daniel has a lot of visions in his book. His visions are not quite as mystical as what we see in the book of Ezekiel, but they can be fairly strange. But they build on one another. And this chapter 2 has a vision that is not Daniel's vision, but it is King Nebuchadnezzar's vision. And this vision kind of sets the groundwork for all the other visions that are coming afterwards. This is sort of like the introduction, and then the next vision, which is Daniel's, kind of expands upon it, and then expands and expands more and more. Now, in this vision, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and he does not tell his wise men the dream. He, I think, is trying to test them to find out, do they really have the power of God, the gods, to be able to interpret their dreams. Now, interpreting a known dream is not necessarily all that difficult. Now, getting a correct interpretation, that's probably a lot more difficult than just interpreting. You can go to any bookstore, you can go to Amazon, you can look for books on dream interpretation, and you will find secular books based on psychology of interpreting dreams. Like I used to have a dream of going to school barefooted with no shoes on. And somebody said, well, that means you feel ill prepared. You're not ready for the day. Sometimes we have dreams of being chased, which is we're worried about something. Maybe you're having a dream about losing your teeth, which probably means you need to go to your dentist. You can also find books that give Christian interpretations to dreams as well. There's probably some truth and some value to that, but this is not the kind of interpretation that we're dealing with. God sent Nebuchadnezzar a dream, and now he asked his Chaldeans, his soothsayers, his magicians, if you will, his sorcerers, sort of like his version of Merlin and Arthur. He's Arthur, and these guys are his Merlins. To one, I had a dream, tell me what my dream is, and two, give me the interpretation. And these wise men are like, oh, king, live forever, but no one would ever ask anybody to do that. Tell us the dream, and we'll give you the interpretation. And the king says, no, you tell me the dream, you tell me the interpretation, or you all die. And they can't do it. Now, word gets to Daniel that this has happened. God does not call Daniel and his friends, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't call Daniel and his friends in, probably trying to give his guys a chance, a little home field advantage here to look good. When Daniel finds out, he begs for time to be able to pray and fast and to seek the answer to the king's dream, and he is granted that. Daniel and his three friends, they pray and fast. The dream and the interpretation comes to Daniel, and he goes to the king and says, oh, great king, you had a dream. You had a dream of a statue whose head is gold, its chest and arms are silver, the belly and lower torso area is made of bronze, the legs are made out of iron, and then the lower legs, the parts lower, the ankles, the feet, they are made of iron and clay. There's a giant stone that falls and hits and destroys the statue. Then that statue becomes a great mountain. And he gives the interpretation that each one of those represents a different kingdom. And he says, O great king, the head is you. You're the head of gold. It is the Babylonians. And we know through history that it works through that it's the Medo-Persian, then it's the Greek Empire, the Roman, and the feet, which is the clay and iron, is considered by many, if you're a premillennialist, to be a future kingdom. Now, there are some people who said, well, because there's iron mixed in, it's got to be some kind of extension of the Roman Empire, and they immediately go to the Roman Catholic Church. There's also the possibility that some people say, well, it's not that, it's just that the Romans represent Europe. So it's something that's coming out of Europe, like the European common market. We don't know, truthfully. But Christ is the stone who becomes the great mountain. Now, after this is kind of the setting, I believe, of chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 1 says, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, there is considerable debate of exactly when this happened. Some people think that it happened almost immediately afterwards, though it would take time to build this, to make the preparations, and to gather everybody. And some think it might actually be a number of years down. Now, I truly believe, and this is just my opinion, so feel free to disagree with me, that Nebuchadnezzar is actually kind of motivated to do this based upon the dream that he has already had. Daniel has said, you're the head of gold, you're the greatest of the empires that are going to follow, you're important, and he wants to kind of set this up. Now, if you start doing the measurements here, you're going to find out that the statue is about 9 feet wide and that it is about 90 feet tall. If this is a statue of a human, just nothing but a statue, it is definitely out of proportion and it's probably going to be a little bit top heavy. It's also not likely to be solid gold. It was very common to make a wooden representation or a stone representation, and I would think probably wood at this particular time, overlaid with gold. It would have been an impressive sight. Some people think that there would be a base, sort of like if you look at the Statue of Liberty, there is a base that the statue is on. Some believe that there is a base with a giant column that goes up, and the statue of the individual at the top is a little bit larger than life, so that it would be in proportion. Again, we don't know. There are even those who think that it might be just a stylized obelisk. Nowhere does it really say that it looks like an individual. But it is set up in the plains of Dura. Now, Heslop, the historian, records that on the plains of Dura, there stands today a rectangular mound about 20 feet high, an exact square of about 46 feet at the base, resembling the pedestal of a colossal statue. Now, this may or may not be the ruins of this statue. We don't know, but it is interesting to note that one historian at least records that there was a pedestal that was standing there. Now, verse 2 and 3. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar, the king, has set up. Then the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province were gathered together upon the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image which Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, I have no idea how long the preparations were going to take, but I'm sure, as I've already mentioned, they've got to get the orchestra together. They've got to build this image. They've got to prepare places. But I want us to notice that, first of all, he really gathers together all the people, all the government people. That's the best way to say that. All the governors, all the princes. The princes actually is a Persian word which means protectors of the realm. But we can see he has everyone that he can gathered together, and included in this list would be, and we're going to see this later, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Interesting note, Daniel is not mentioned in this particular book, or excuse me, this particular chapter anywhere. There have been all kinds of speculations as to why he's not mentioned. Some go out on a limb and say, well, Daniel wasn't in Babylon at that time, that he had been sent on a diplomatic mission. I find that kind of hard to believe that they, would not have brought him. They would have brought him back for such an important occasion. There are those who say that he might have been on a raised pedestal type area with the king and would not have been required to have bowed down since he was with the king at that time. And I actually heard one really weird theory that I find no validity in it at all, is that Daniel actually bowed down at this particular time, and that later by the stand of his three friends, he is convicted, and that it's actually Daniel who goes into the fiery furnace to join his friends, and he's the one who lets them loose, and he's the fourth man. As I said, I don't see any validity in that at all. But this is just to kind of set the scene and let you know how important this was. Yes, this is an act of worship, but more than an act of worship, I think it is a test of loyalty that Nebuchadnezzar is setting up for the people, to prove their loyalty to him and to prove their loyalty to the Babylonian Empire as well. Now, verse 4 tells us that then a herald cried aloud, "To you is commanded, O people, nations, and language." I kind of in my mind picture this, not just a single herald, because this is a large plain area. If the location that people believe is correct is about 6 miles south of the ancient ruins of Babylon. It's a large area, very large area, unless there's some kind of really awesome acoustics about this place, because it actually means a flat place walled. Now, that doesn't mean a wall. It could be a flat place walled by hills and mountains, so that it's like a natural amphitheater. But I kind of picture several different heralds who have a scroll that they are reading from. But he calls, "O people, nations, and languages." Peoples would be like the nation. To bring this to our terms today, peoples would be the United States. Nations would actually be the individual states. So all you governors, mayors, people of America, all you governors, mayors, councilmen, city people of the individual states, and all languages, because even here in our state, we have people who speak, I'm sure, many, many languages, but we have a high concentration of people who speak Spanish. We have a high concentration of people who speak Vietnamese, and I am sure that there are other languages that are spoken because of the many universities and colleges that we have around here. But he's addressing every one of these leaders. No one is excluded. And he says that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. Now, it's very difficult to understand what all of these instruments are. Now, we have a cornet in our modern marching bands and things. It's very trumpet-like. Most likely this isn't a cornet as you and I think of a cornet today. It simply means an animal horn. So maybe think a Jewish shofar or something of that line. A flute is probably not a flute like we think of today, a metal flute, but is probably more like a fife, which is a wooden type flute, a lot smaller, bigger than a piccolo, smaller than a flute. or it could actually be like a recorder or a 10-penny whistle. The harp, sackbut, psaltery, they are all stringed instruments of various sizes and different shapes. Some will have 20, some will have 5, some will have 3. So they're all just different stringed instruments. It would be, again, not that they looked anything like this, but it would be equivalent to there being violins and cellos and basses and violas in an orchestra today. The dulcimer. Now, in the mountain regions of the South, we have two different instruments we call a dulcimer. We have a hammered dulcimer, and then we just have a mountain dulcimer where you can chord and string. They come in a 3 and 4 string variety. It's not a dulcimer as, again, we think of it, a dulcimer. I like this. You might not like it, but I like this because it means this instrument is biblical. Many people believe that instead of a dulcimer, that this is actually bagpipes, okay? Coming from a Scottish ancestor, yes, bagpipes in the Bible, so it's a spiritual instrument. Not really, because it's being used for satanic things. But as soon as you hear this music, and I'm going to say this is not just any music, okay? Music has the ability to touch our minds and our hearts. Watch a movie at any given time. There's just like a 2-note thing. I guess you'd have to call it a song. Da-dum, da-dum, da-da-da. And what do you immediately think of? If you're old enough, you think of Jaws, and you see that shark swimming faster and faster and faster, and that mouth opening up. Or what about Rocky's theme? Darth Vader's theme. Even Charlie Brown has his own theme. And they're designed to make us feel certain ways. I like to watch these Chinese, Korean, and Japanese movies in the original languages. And since I don't speak any of those languages, the subtitles have got to be on. But sometimes it says mysterious music playing in the background, thrilling music playing in the background, romantic music. Why? Because they know that the music will draw you in. And as much as anything, this music is designed to stir the soul, to overwhelm you, and to cause you to fall down and worship. So this is the command. When you hear the music, you fall down in worship. Here's the penalty if you do not. And whosoever falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So we haven't even talked about this yet. You've had to take time to maybe build that pedestal. You've had time to erect the statue. You've had time to train your musicians. And all these things can be happening simultaneously. You've had the time it takes to gather all of these officials together into this one location. And it's the time to take to build the fiery furnace that is right there. Because within the very hour, that doesn't mean, okay, it's way over here and we're going to go back and you're going to have a trial and you're going to do this. If you don't fall down, we're pretty much just taking you right over there and we're chunking you in the fire. And maybe you could see the smoke billowing out. And maybe if you were close enough, you could feel the flames or see the flames coming out. And verse 7 gives us the results. Therefore, at the time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, they left out the bagpipes that time. A lot of people would like to leave out the bagpipes. All the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king set up. Now, this says everyone. And let's be honest, it's enough people that it's everyone. It's everybody but 3. And these 3 individuals are noticed. It says, therefore, at a certain time, Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. Chaldeans is a term that deals with these soothsayers, magicians, the people who were not able to do what Daniel and his three friends did in chapter 2. So they're probably looking for a little bit of revenge, a little bit of payback at this particular time. And they come to the king, and they are very respectful to the king. "O king, live forever." They are greeting him. They are praising him. And then they ask him a question. "King, let's make sure we got this command correct. You made a decree, and I'm not going to read verse 10 and go through all of those instruments again. You got it down from all the other readings. You made this decree that when all of the musicians, this orchestra plays this music, that everybody's supposed to fall down and worship." And I am sure the king is probably sitting there nodding his head. Yeah, that's true. And they go, "And didn't you say that whosoever doesn't fall down and worship, they're going to be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace?" And the king's like, "Yeah, that's exactly what the decree is." Now let me say this. King Nebuchadnezzar is known for his pursuit of justice. Now, when we say justice, we mean obedience to the law. We don't actually mean what is right. He's the king. He's the monarch. He's the one who makes the rules. He is the law, and he decides what's right or wrong. But he is known for justice and seeking his interpretation of justice. These people come up, and after they've made this clear, they have reminded the king of what he said. He goes, "Excuse us. There are certain Jews that you have set over the affairs of this province," and I think they're kind of hinting at they're not worthy of this position. They're not worthy of this. Their names, calling them by their Babylonian names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And here's the charges. 1, they do not have regard for you. They don't respect you. They don't honor you. They are not loyal to you. They do not serve your gods. Okay? They don't serve your gods. And part of a test of loyalty in this era would have been, do you worship my gods? And third, they have not worshiped the golden image that you set up. Now, when we read the book of Revelation, we are going to see that when the beast comes upon the scene, that the false prophet is going to set up an image, and he is going to command all the people to worship this image. The vast majority of people are going to do that. Again, enough so that it will be said that all people worship it. But there will be those believers that are in the tribulation period. Again, if you are a premillennialist, that they will not worship, and they will suffer the consequences for it. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, because of his command, his pursuit of justice, the thought of being betrayed by these individuals that he has honored, it says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and his fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king." So they made their charges, they made their accusations against the three men before the men were there. And Nebuchadnezzar, and I think this is a sign of his pursuit of justice, he speaks to them. And he says, "Fellas, guys, there's some very serious charges that have been laid out against you. It says that you're not loyal to me. It says you don't worship my gods. It said that you didn't worship the image that I set up. And the penalty for this is you're going to be thrown in the fiery furnace. Is this true?" And they were pretty much so, yes, it's true. And the king now gives them a second chance. Do this. Do this. When you're going to give you a second chance, when the music plays, fall down and worship it, and everything will be okay. But if you don't, we're going to throw you into the fiery furnace. And what God is there? Now, I know the King James Version has this a capital G, and for the three Hebrew men, it is Jehovah God. I think probably since this is Nebuchadnezzar, who is a pagan, we might want to put this down in a lowercase g. He's like, what God is there out there that can save you? Will Baal save you? Will Nebu save you? Will Moloch save you? What God is there? Will your God be able to save you and deliver you out of my hand? Now, I think this is one of the great moments in these three men's lives. O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. Now, they are not saying he will deliver us. But he says, our God is able to deliver us. But here's the thing, and this is sort of the Morrison expanded paraphrase here, the Morrison Amplified Bible here. Our God will deliver us out of your hand either by the fire or through the fire, or from the fire. So, if we're thrown into the fiery furnace, we die, we go to paradise, we're with God, we're with Abraham, we're with our forefathers. It's a win for us. And if God delivers us from the fire, in that one, we're not thrown into the fire, or two, we're thrown in the fire and we are saved, he's delivered us out of your hand. And again, verse 19 says, then was Nebuchadnezzar again full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed. His entire attitude toward these three men, he's kind, he's wanting to save them, he, in a way, respects them, and now he is just burning with pure hatred. You can see it in his face. And he charges that the furnace be heated up super, super hot. I have no idea. Just throwing more fuel on it isn't going to just do that. You're going to have to pump some more oxygen in there, get some more air in there, sort of like a blacksmith with his billows heating it up. Or now they've got the little fan blowers that you can hand turn. Actually, people have gotten electric motors to heat them up. But somehow they heat it up 7 times normal heat. And then he takes his most mighty men, his strongest, most valor men. These are the guys who, have all the medals on their chest. And he tells them to take these 3 men and throw them in the fire. And the fire is so hot, and we can all understand that. My dad used to smoke, and sometimes when we would lose power and we had the kerosene lamps out burning, instead of using his lighter to light his cigarette, he would lean over the kerosene lamp, and he would light it just from the heat coming up out of the chimney of the glass lamp there. The heat coming off is so hot that the clothes, the pants, the hats, the garments of those mighty men caught on fire, and they were killed just from the heat alone. Nebuchadnezzar was astonished. He's probably close enough to the fiery furnace. Well, he has to be close. The platform, the raised area that he's on is probably close enough that he can see into the fiery furnace, and he's watching and everything. He's probably expecting to get some pleasure, maybe some relief at the justice of these men for their disloyalty being punished. But he looks and he sees something that is unusual. He looks around at these Chaldeans, his counselors that are there, and he's like, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay? Didn't we throw 3 men into the fiery furnace? And they're like, yes, Your Majesty, we threw 3 men into the fiery furnace. And he is like, I see 4 guys in there. I see 4 guys in there. We bound them hand and foot, but they're not bound anymore. And instead of rolling around and screaming in pain, they are walking around in the midst of this fire. It's not hurting them. He's probably like, I've been burnt before. Maybe he ate something that was too hot and burnt the roof of his mouth. Maybe he picked up a bowl of something that was too hot and kind of burned his hands on the ceramics. So he knows fire hurts. And then he goes on, and the form of the 4th is likened to, in the King James Version reads, the Son of God. Now, I want to touch on a textual problem here. And this isn't a big textual problem, but it is a problem. The NIV and some of the more modern translations says that he looks like the son of the gods, or one of the race of the gods is another possible translation of this. And a lot of people, they're doing away with the deity of Jesus Christ. This is Jesus. This is him. 1. Remember I said Nebuchadnezzar is a pagan at this time. He worships many different gods. So in his mind, it's not the Son of God, because he doesn't believe in one single God like the Jews did. And the Hebrew language that this is written in, it is actually in the plural. So while we interpret the Son of God, meaning Jesus, Nebuchadnezzar probably did say Son of the gods, being plural. Then he goes and he brings them out of the fiery furnace. And everybody who's there, the counselors, the satraps, the governors, the captains, they look and they see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and there's nothing. I mean, you ever taken a hot bath or a hot shower? Your skin turns red. Maybe you've been sunburned and you get blistered. Maybe, unfortunately, you have received some pretty major burns. Something happens. When you're exposed to heat long enough, something's going to happen. But the Bible says that they saw that the fire had no power over them. They are just as pale as they were when they went in. There's no sweating. There is no redness of the skin. There is no blistering. There is no pain. Maybe you've touched something and it didn't blister you, but just something kind of warm, and you get that, quick reflex of jerking away. Because none of that. None of their hairs of their head were singed. Hair melts at a pretty low temperature. Their coats weren't charred, and neither was there the smoke of fire on them. And then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel." We remember the word angel in both the Greek and the Hebrew language can refer to a celestial being, such as a cherubim or seraphim, but it can also simply mean a messenger. So this can be that God sent an angelic being, or God could have sent Christ in the form of a Christophany to deliver his servants. Now, because of this, two things happen. The king makes a new decree. Every people, nation, and language, this is the same groups that have been mentioned over, which say anything amiss about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, if they say anything wrong about him, if they say anything bad about him, they will be cut into pieces. Their house will be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver like this. He recognizes the fact that the God of the Israelites is greater than all the other gods. Secondly, he promotes them once again in the government. They are raised up even higher. Now, we're not going to be looking at chapter 4, but I want to mention this here because of what has happened in that verse 29 about his decree about God. God humbles Nebuchadnezzar. He basically turns him into the beast of the field for a number of years, because in his arrogance and pride, he thinks he's the one who's done everything. God brings him low, and after a period of time, he restores his sanity to him. And he writes a really great testimony. It's probably the best word to use. It's in Babylonian, it's in cuneiform, Chaldean. And he praises God. And actually, when I read that now, I wouldn't use this to witness to somebody, but I actually think he's speaking of what we would call a salvation experience. The testimony of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is such that I truly believe that in the course of his lifetime, he became a believer, and this is one of the first steps. So let's all bow, and we'll be dismissed with a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for the courage that it took to stand. And I truly believe, Father, that there is a time coming very soon in our nation when we are going to be called upon to make this kind of stand. This is not unusual. It has happened in Nazi Germany. It has happened in Ghana and other places that rulers have set up government, set up statues of themselves, and demand that people worship them and serve them. And I truly believe that something similar will happen soon. I pray, Father, for your people that we will have the courage, the strength, and the integrity to stand strong. But even now, we would purpose in our heart, just as Daniel and his friends did in chapter 1, to stand strong in these difficult days. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.